Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me here today John Scott, first of its kind interview, which we'll get into soon. But first, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matthew.
So John, go ahead. Just how about you give a quick introduction of yourself and how we came across each other?
Okay, sure. So my background is I am a CPA, started with Anders in the early 90s, mid-sized local firm, one office, and we got a lot of our referrals from attorneys. So early in my career, I was very fortunate to meet an entrepreneurial attorney who I had a 17-year relationship with, and I watched him grow his firm by monitoring data. He went from one metropolitan area to across the entire United States, and he did it using data. He did dabble in fixed fee work, and I saw you at ABA Tech Week. Great presentation on the subscription model for law firms. I'm a big proponent of subscription-based fees, fixed fees, and value billing. And I came up to you afterwards and I said, do you track time? And your answer was, no, I don't. And then I gave you a couple of reasons why you should track time. And then you said, hey, I'd love to debate this on my podcast. So that's why we're here. And let me start out by saying, I hate tracking time. I cannot wait until the day when I no longer track time. I can't imagine sitting at home when every day is a Saturday saying, drank coffee and watched the news, 0.45.
So good. So, there's common ground, but there's minor disagreement, which again, this is why I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast. But I want even a little bit more background. So why lawyers? I mean, CPAs can help anybody with their taxes. What drew you to legal professionals and law firms?
Well, being a mid-sized firm in St. Louis, most of our referrals came from attorneys. So we spent a lot of time cultivating those relationships. And when I met this entrepreneurial attorney, I got a great education in how to run a law firm. And so I was able then to talk to other attorneys and managing partners of those firms to help them make business decisions. It didn't start out that I was consulting with law firms, but over time, it evolved that more and more of my clients were lawyers and law firms, and that just became a natural progression in my career.
Yeah, sounds sort of similar to a friend of the show, Steve Fretchen, who's a lawyer business development coach. I don't know, do you know Steve Fretchen?
I do know Steve, great guy.
Yeah, so he was a similar thing. He was doing coaching, helping with sales and business development for just anyone, and all of a sudden, all of his best clients were lawyers. So he was like, there's something here. Maybe I should lean into this. So it sounds like it was a similar sort of a progression for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's a little bit more like what does a CPA for lawyers even do? Like, what are you helping lawyers with?
Well, specifically, we can handle any part of the finance function, whether it's the transactional piece, receipts and disbursements, reconciliation of bank accounts. The next level up is we'll meet with you a couple times a month to look at your financials, your pipeline, key performance indicators. And then at the highest level, we'll meet 4 to 6 times per month and actually be your fractional CFO. And what we do is we do it on a subscription model. And it's not just the VCFO that you're getting. You're also getting an accountant, an IT person, and a manager. So you're getting a finance department on a fractional basis.
Well, see, that's interesting. See, that I didn't know coming into the show. So before we even get into whether or not you should be tracking your time, regardless of your law firm model, let's talk a little bit about that. Why subscription model for a fractional CFO?
Well, we think the value proposition is for small and mid-sized firms that they don't have enough relevance fee-wise or revenue-wise to hire a qualified CFO. So they end up hiring their neighbor's cousin who's a bookkeeper, and they get historical information, which is of no value. If I get my books reconciled, 3 weeks after the month end, I can't make decisions based on that. So we want to come in an economical way and give you real-time data. I like to tell the story about when our grandfather took the family on vacation. The night before he got everybody in the station wagon, he looked at a 10-year-old Atlas and he made some notes. And the next morning they piled in and they took off. And all he could react to was what he saw along the way. And then our parents had it a little better. They had AAA triptychs, which would tell them outside of Atlanta there was construction. Here's a workaround. Today we have Google Maps and the Waze app that gives you instantaneous data. It can tell you that a half mile up ahead, the road's closed, but here's a workaround that'll keep you on your path. That's the same thing that we can do in advisory services for companies now, is pay attention to the data, have real-time current financial data, and a forecast that'll tell us where we're going, how we're going to achieve our goals. And, oh, if something happens, we can anticipate that and give a workaround so we can still hit our goals.
So super interesting. And now I'm seeing on the website here, it's anderscpa.com/virtual-cfo-legal. So link to that in the show notes. But you have your pricing and your subscription tiers right here on the website. So you've got a 3-tiered structure, right? You've got transactional, controller, and virtual CFO. And so boom, right there, you're doing sort of the tried and true subscription-based 3-tiered pricing, good, better, best pricing. Right, you've got your low level, your mid level, your high level based on the needs. And so we like talking business models here on the Law Subscribed podcast, in particular subscription. So I mean, I sort of just threw it out there, the good, better, best 3-tiered pricing. To what extent were you involved in like coming up with this model? And can you speak to like why you include the subscription benefits that you do at each level, kind of a thing?
Well, I can't claim credit for the model because I was a part of Anders and we acquired a company called Summit CPAs 2 years ago. And they had done this for 10 years and they had grown it from 0 to $10 million. And when they came in here, the idea is that we would scale into different niches. And so that's what we're doing. Now, the pricing model is even more transparent than you think based on the website, because when we have an introduction to a client who is interested, we go through that, and each one of those services at each level is a toggle, and the client can see the price change as they include or exclude different services. So if you take out payroll, somebody internally is going to handle payroll with Gusto or ADP. We flip that to a no, and the price changes. We also bill on a weekly basis. So you get the weekly fee and the annual fee, but it comes out on a weekly basis. So we don't have any AR problems, and the client gets to pay on a weekly basis. It's a subscription model that it's not a year commitment or a 3-year commitment. You give us a little bit of notice and boom, we're done. You've grown to the size where you can hire your own finance department. You tell us, and a month later we're gone and we transition over. Additionally, when we do onboarding, part of that process is creating a document that talks about all of your different finance functions, how they're handled, who handles them internally or what position, so that when you do grow out of us and you have your own team, you have a manual that says, here's the finance function and how it's handled.
Super interesting. A few things I want to point out there. So this model, it's unique in that all the other subscription businesses we've had on the show have typically done like a monthly or an annual subscription model. But here you've got your pricing listed on the website, and like you said, where they pay on a weekly basis. So that's interesting. I do want to pull on that thread in a minute, but some other things I want to highlight for the audience. And that is how you said it is customizable, but you are putting average prices on the website. So it says like, and the prices are on the website. These podcast episodes are meant to be evergreen. Prices are always subject to change. But for example, right now at time of recording, transactional says $950 per week average for that level. So that's a really interesting way to explain and market the subscription, and that you say it's customizable. I do a similar thing with my business in that I do have certain prices that I don't customize and negotiate for my clients. But for the business clients, I do have some business subscription levels on my website. But I say in there in the my website copy, I'll make a custom package for you, because not every single business is going to fit into that that package that you've set up. And we as professionals have the flexibility, unlike a true software company, to adapt to the actual client needs, right? So
Right.
I'm the only person who I think is both advertising a price and customizing. So I'm curious to know from your customer client perspective, like how has that gone over with them doing that sort of methodology?
I think people love it because basically we're going through we'll call it a sales call, and they're picking and choosing their services a la carte, and they can see the price change below. And they can say, whoa, that's too much. Okay, well, what can we take off the plate to get to a price that works for you? And as far as customizing, I'm going to have a call later today with a firm that's got 11 offices, and they don't need traditionally what we sell. What they're looking for is a consultant to come in and advise them on a partner structure. How do they treat the managing partner? How do they admit and get rid of, retire out equity partners? They're looking for someone to set up kind of their partnership. They've grown from, just a few partners to now they have many people that they want to admit into the partnership. They've never really had a capital structure that made sense. So they're looking for a consultant that'll write a report. And I'm going to start the call off saying, that's not me, but I do know about the things you're interested in. And what I'd like to propose is let's come up to a monthly fee and I'll be available to consult with you on a regular basis. It'll be heavier in the front end and lighter in the back end, but I want a long-term relationship with you at a price that they're comfortable with. But if they're looking for a McKinsey or somebody to come in and spend a couple days with them, write a $15,000 report, that's not me, because that consultant just goes away and hands you a document and then it's up to you to implement. I would much rather be a part of the solution going forward.
Right, because there's not going to be like okay, this is the solution, this is the answer. It's always going to be that way. You'll never have to change it or adapt to changing circumstances. That's just not reality. That's a
Right.
fiction that you want to believe. We do the same thing. This is a great example to talk about this. We do the same thing with education. Okay, we're going to spend six figures or almost six figures. We're going to go to college. We're going to get this piece of paper that
Oh,
says, I've learned, I'm smart, I've got my degree. Now I could do it. Well, that's really just where the work begins. Our learning just starts at the end of college, right? But we like to pretend. So it is like I don't know if it's a societal thing or a cultural thing that, okay, like I get told something and now I know this thing and then I could apply that thing forever. But that's simply just not the way that the real world works.
y-
And the
y-
subscription model allows an adaptation. And that's what that's what you're going to try to convey to this client.
right. And I totally agree with you on education. You know, young people come out of school and they think, well, I got my degree. And I know that I'm on the more experienced side here. So that's a HR way of saying I'm older. Okay. So the 20 somethings, they don't necessarily want to work to make someone else money. But I heard a managing partner of a law firm say something to his young staff just recently. And it basically was, hey, what you do in the first 5 to 7 years of your career creates your experience level and your reputation, and it defines the next 30 years of your career. So you're not working hard to make the current partners money. You're working hard to set up the rest of your career. You're doing it for you, whether it's at this firm or the next firm, you're setting up the next 30 years of your career. And I think that's the part that's missing. When these kids come out of school, and my own children are a great example of this, they want to be vice president of XYZ immediately. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an ongoing process for everything. We like to think, I always liken it back to the black and white fallacy or the bifurcation fallacy, which is it's either this or it's that, or it's all or it's nothing. We like to think, things are certain, but everything's in the gray. Nothing's black, nothing's white, everything's in the gray. And the subscription model fills that need really well, including, I think, some of the problems. I'm curious to know your experience working with attorneys that are using different business models. The billable hour is prevalent. There's been flat fee for a while. In fact, before the billable hour, for law firms anyway, it was only flat fees set by bar associations. And so, but there were always issues there. There were always problems. You either overscope or underscope the problem, and we still kind of pretend that there's this end thing. And even in litigation, arguably, it's like, okay, you settle or you go to trial or you appeal, and eventually there's an end. But there are things that happen at the end post-trial. The easiest one to talk about is like family law or criminal law. You got on probation. Now you got to comply with probation. You got divorced. Yeah, you got to comply with the decree or the marital settlement agreement. And so there's ongoing needs post this final event that the subscription model lends itself incredibly well to for lawyers to continue to provide. Even like you said, there's more work at the beginning, and then there's maybe less work post getting past a certain threshold. But that's why you've got subscription tiers. You go up and down a subscription tier. If you're customizable like you and me, you have a meeting with the customer or the client and you say, okay, we've gotten you past this threshold. Your needs are fewer. And so let's bring you down to subscription levels. And then you're still available to them. And they could contact you and you have that recurring revenue,
Right.
paid in advance, no
It's
accounts receivables, like you said,
it's
right? So
certainly easy to forecast when you have recurring revenue at a fixed fee amount, and the client doesn't worry about picking up the phone and calling you because they're already paying. They know what they're paying, and they can call you as much or as little as they need to.
right. Another thing I want to ask you about, because I'm curious about this, I think maybe this could work with certain types of legal practices. I think maybe it's a little bit more obvious with a CPA for a law firm, but you have like so many meetings per month, right? One meeting per month, six or two meetings per month, or six meetings per month. And again, I'm sure these are customizable too. This is just what's advertised on the website. So whatever they're paying per month or per week, that adds up to per month, ends up with a capped amount of meetings per month that I'm assuming are scheduled in advance. You get them on the calendar, and then they have the meeting with you. And whether it takes, maybe you cap it at an hour, but whether it takes 20 minutes or an hour or whatever it is, you have the meeting at, those meetings every month. Like, how is that working for you?
Well, ideally, you'd say, okay, we're going to have a meeting Thursday mornings at 9 o'clock. You know, it doesn't work that way though with busy professionals. So we have people that schedule these meetings and try and get them on a consistent, regular cadence. But, you know, with professional schedules, we have to be flexible.
Mhm.
And we use Calendarly, and, it's easy to coordinate schedules that way. But ideally, you'd have a regular cadence of meetings on a specific day, just like you'd have a partner meeting, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Right, right. I mean, and that's where the fractional team member comes in, but whether it's chief, fractional legal officer, fractional, financial officer, you're a member of the team. So just like your team has meetings, well, with your
Right.
fractional team members, you want to have meetings with them too. So that's really interesting. So right now, my clients schedule time to talk to me, and I use Calendly too, and we'll have the tech talk in a minute here. But I make myself pretty available. They could schedule times whenever they want, but I don't let them schedule any calls with me or any meetings with me within 24 hours. I always make it so that I always have time to prepare for the meeting. So I want to have that time. So they know that. And I train my clients to be like, okay, this is what you can expect. You're not going to get me within 24 hours. The other lawyers will happily charge you a lot of money for that. I'm not that kind of lawyer. But what I have been trying to play around with some of my bigger clients, some of my business clients, are these like scheduled recurring meetings. So now they don't even like, it almost like alleviates the need for scheduled meeting for them to schedule a call with me at that point in time, because you're having these scheduled meetings. So I liked seeing that you're doing it. And that's why I wanted to ask about it, because I've been playing around with that as well for some of the bigger clients. So you mentioned Calendly, and you also talked about the software. Like when you're in the software and you're having a meeting with them, you share your screen, you show them, we take this on, we take this off, here's the total price. Like, is that custom software that when you acquired with Summit, or is this something that you're using some off the shelf software that you've customized to your purposes? Because we love talking tech on this show, and we always try to figure out what tech our subscription business is using, and can we use it for our law firms?
I would love to tell you it is some really cutting edge technology. It's a robust Excel spreadsheet
Oh yeah, okay.
was built over time by the Summit folks, and we've tweaked it as we've gone along. At the bottom of you can even include the entity tax return, the partner's tax returns, and those. If you saw those in the CPA firm, they might be the price might be built differently. But here, because we do so many, we can price it in a very similar manner. So it's easy to say, yes, we're doing 3 partner returns and the entity return. Here's the price.
Hmm. I mean, there is something pure about just looking at an Excel spreadsheet updating. So there's something to that. But then for you, John, and for your team to take something from this podcast back to your team, is there are at least 2 ways I know of to turn spreadsheets into apps. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Glide is a software that helps you turn spreadsheets into apps. And then if you were to convert it to a Google Doc or a Google Sheet instead of an Excel sheet, and that doesn't always work well, though I think it's gotten a lot better in recent years. There's a Google app that's like part of Google. And if you're paying for Google Workspace, you get access to this at a certain level, but I'm sure you could subscribe to it separately, called App Sheet. And it takes your Google Sheet and turns it into an app. And so, and again, it's not gonna be the most beautiful, perfectly designed app that you've ever seen because it's not building software from scratch, but it's gonna be nicer looking with a smoother interface than say like just an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, right? So I've dabbled with these tools. They're kind of easy to understand. I think you need a little bit of a coder, even though it's no code. You kind of like I feel like you might need a coder mindset to get a better like use of the tools, but it's doable. And then, John, we're going to be hearing about Summit Virtual CFO by Anders app that you're now selling to other companies. So it just becomes another product stream, revenue stream, and a product that you could license at that point. So you're welcome.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I will run that up the flagpole and see. I'm sure we have people that do Power BI and coding, and actually we'll get into a story about 1099s. We there use a bot that we developed to create efficiencies on that. But one thing about the template that we use for pricing, we record the sales calls for a couple of reasons, but the most important one is we want the team, the onboarding team and the team that's going to be serving the relationship to understand what was promised and talked about during the sales call.
Mm-hmm.
And then within 24 hours, we send a PDF of the pricing model and a statement of work out to the client. So really the sales process, once you have that call, is pretty short because the client is saying yes or no. You're agreeing to a price, and then a statement of work goes out. And the client, of course, knows that the call was recorded and why it was recorded so that we can all be on the same page about what was talked about.
Really interesting. And we will get to the 1099s thing in a minute here, but while we're still kind of on the technology side of things, like what are you using to record? Is it just in Zoom like we're on right now?
It is Zoom or Teams. We do a lot of Teams calls as well.
Oh, of course, because a lot of the lawyers are using Microsoft Office products, and so they're in Teams, right, as well.
Right. And we are internally as well.
Yeah.
Look, remote work, if you had talked to me before Summit and before the pandemic, remote work we had it. We had people that would leave us, spouse got transferred to Ohio and we didn't want to lose them. So we set them up with a home office. But the pandemic compressed 10 years worth of remote work into 18 months. And now the world has changed forever.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation, and we could go down that rabbit hole, but let's try to keep on topic here. So you're recording it in Zoom or Teams or something. And then do you just, you send the whole thing, or do you like edit it to take out the blank space and the ums and the ahs or anything like that?
No, we don't edit it. The other thing we use is, and we'll do that in a lot of meetings. In fact, I have some people that I share content ideas with, and I have Otter on my phone and on my laptop, and I'll be out walking and think, wow, this is a good topic. And I'll just blurt out, 5 minutes worth of random thoughts on XYZ topic. And then we'll develop that into some social media content or LinkedIn.
So for what it's worth, again, just trying to make sure like that you appreciate coming on the show to give me content for my audience, but I could give you something in return, is I use a tool to edit this podcast and do my marketing and recordings and stuff in a tool called Descript. It's like description, but it ends at the T. And so what you could do is you can take that recording, upload it into Descript. It's going to transcribe it for you. And with like sort of we talked about before we clicked record today, is with the click of a button, all the ums and ahs gone. Any blank space, any like seconds that are like, just dead air, you could delete with another click of a button and bring it down to 0.1 seconds, I think is the smallest you can make it. And what does this do for the client or the prospective client is if they want to watch through that video again, it just saves them time for like, they didn't need to sit through the ums and ahs. You're not substantively changing this, the substance of what you said to manipulate it in any way. And so the video gets shorter. And what's nice about this tool too is it creates you could publish it as a link that you could just text or email them or turn it into a QR code for that PDF. And you could put the QR code, here's the video here's a QR code to the video. So in Canva has a free convert link to QR code. So it creates a shareable link, and then they could watch that link. They could comment, just like it's like your own custom like YouTube video. So they have the transcript, they could comment, they could watch it, they could speed up the video rewatch up to 2 times. I think it's even maybe up to 3 times speed in certain formats, but up to 2 times speed. So like 1.5, 1.25, right? Like they could speed up the watch so it takes less time, especially when you're dealing with lawyers who are billing time.
Right.
The faster they could rewatch that video, the better. right? So like this tool Descript, and it's not expensive. I mean, I think the first paid version is like there's a freemium, so you could play around with it for free, but it's like $12 a month for like the first level. And then for the second level of paid tier, it's $24 a month, which I happily pay $288 annually to do all the cool features, advanced features of this thing. Plus, it gives you more audio transcription. That's also what you're paying for. So I get up to 30 hours a month of transcription, even having a, a podcast that's been growing like crazy and also using it for marketing. I've never hit that 30-hour cap. So just something to think about, like this tool Descript could really help speed up that process for the way that you're describing what you're kind of already doing. When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional-only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high-quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. What do you think?
Right.
What do you think about that?
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So then back into some other technology. So we've talked about Teams, the Microsoft suite. We've talked about Excel. Oh yes. So the AI bot that you're doing for the 1099s, that's another way you're using technology innovatively. Go ahead, talk about that.
Well, it was always frustrating to me when we do 1099s for clients and they have 3 to 5 1099s, and the time that it took to do those manually would add up to an amount of WIP or work in process that I didn't feel there was much value there. Mm-hmm. So we created a bot, and I didn't have a whole lot of faith in that bot yet, but I had a law firm call and say, hey, would you do our 1099s? And law firms, especially ones that get referred cases in and have fee splits, have a ton of 1099s. This particular firm had 279 1099s. And I went to our OAS folks and I said, okay, how do I price this? And they said, well, with the bot, we're going to charge a $600 setup fee plus $7 per 1099. And I said, whoa, that seems really low. They said, well, we think it's good. When I got the time back, it was not only good, it was great. And the client was happy to pay $2,600 for this many 1099s. It took it out of their domain. They didn't have to spend a couple of days doing it with their finance team. And we didn't have that much WIP in it. And because we had quoted a fixed fee, it was a profitable job for us. And it went from me being afraid to quote this and take it on to, wow, we should be doing more of this. And why aren't we doing this same format with our 3 to 5 1099 projects? So I think we're going to really migrate and go to that on all 1099 projects, because it just created all kinds of efficiency that wasn't there before.
And that's the power of automation and AI analysis, right?
It really is. Now, for law firms, and I guess for accounting firms too, if our engagement letters say time and expense, then we really need that efficiency gets passed on to the client, right? I think California came out and said, if you're going to get AI efficiencies and you're billing on time, then that's the client's win. So I think you need to modify those engagement letters to say, we may have some time and expense projects, but we're also going to quote you fixed fee projects. And that's where you can get the value. As long as the value's there, I don't think there's any ethical problems billing, as long as your engagement letter covers fixed fee.
Absolutely. Or recurring fixed fee, which is subscription.
Right.
And I do get those questions from lawyers. It's like, well, my ethics don't allow for subscription. I was like, do they allow for fixed fee? And most of them do. Yeah. And what is subscription if not recurring fixed fee? That's exactly what it is. You just have to make sure. Yeah.
Ultimately, we're going to get to value billing, right? It's about the value that the client sees. They have a need. What are they willing to pay to satisfy that need? And what are we willing to do to satisfy that need? We're going to come to some mutual agreement and everybody's happy.
Right. And like my market that I'm serving is the latent legal market. And like, so like $20 a month, $50 a page, right? That's sort of that level. And they could schedule a call, and within 24 hours, we could have a 15-minute call, assuming I'm not booked out for the whole next day, right? But they'll always be able to schedule some time with me. That's not to be said that you can't offer a premium subscription service that is, you call me, I answer. And if the value for your client, speaking about value building, is I want my lawyer to pick up when I call, or a lawyer at the firm to pick up when I call, and it gets routed to an available lawyer, maybe they're willing to pay $5,000 a month for that. Who knows, right? If that's the value that they want, is when I call, I want my lawyer to pick up. I don't care if 6 months goes by and I never call my lawyer. When I call, I expect an answer. Maybe
Agreed.
that's the value that they want, right? So how you define value really matters, even with the subscription model, whether it's flat, fixed, some sort of fixed fee, or subscription and fixed fee.
That's the concierge doc model, right?
Right.
You want access to a doctor and not have to wait 6 weeks to see him? You're going to pay an annual fee plus something per visit.
Right, exactly. And the subscription plus flat fee model does a really good job of doing something like that, which is what I do for my entry level subscribers. $20 a month just gets you access to me. It's not going to be robust legal services. You're going to pay for that a la carte, based upon whatever your thing is. And if I haven't priced out what that thing is, like a real estate closing or a simple estate plan, that's where the $50 a page comes in. Anyone could steal this. This isn't an original idea of mine for legal services, but I don't think I could patent it. So, all listeners, feel free to adapt to this model in some way. I think, though, and this is where we defer, John, is you said you got the time back, and you're talking about, tracking time. And let's just talk about why you think that's still necessary.
Because you're going to have different margins, and there's a certain internal margin that you want and need to make a profit. And I think without tracking time, you're not going to have the data to make those decisions. Now, it goes beyond that. Also, if you don't track time, and it's really rate times zero, right? You're not charging a standard rate per hour, but you need to know what that internal rate is. You may have some staff that are wildly inefficient because they need training, or they really are struggling with a certain technology that you're using in your practice, but you're not going to know that unless you track time. You're going to tell me that your gut will tell you that things are okay, but if you're not tracking time, you don't know that Joey is really swimming with whatever client matter you're giving to them. But if you do track your time, you're going to say, hey, Joey's struggling with this software or this area of the law, and I'm going to invest in him to get him more training. Lawyers don't use leverage that well. Compared to the accounting profession, leverage of 3 to 1 is a fantastic lawyer leverage. The accounting world is 9 or 10 to 1. And so why don't they use leverage? Well, they think what they do is unique and artistic, and nobody can do it like them. They haven't spent the time training the next generation. In your model, where you don't track time, you don't know how your subordinates are progressing or not. Yeah, I think you can look back and say, well, we could have been more efficient on that, but you don't have the data that proves that out.
So I think there's other ways, because I agree with all of the pitfalls that you're talking about. I just don't know that tracking time makes sense. It is the best way to solve those problems. And here's some alternatives. For example, I'm not tracking any time whatsoever. I'm also a true solo, so it's just me. Right. So the faster I get stuff done and move on to the next thing, the better. I have like the inverse relationship of time and money. The less time I spend on something, the more money I make, because I'm just trying to get the work done, build the automation, get the client, do the thing, have the interview, whatever it is, right? Move on to the next thing. But what I do is, and I could always do a better job, and I'm looking for a technology solution, and I think you could do this for teams too, is I do time blocking. So one of the reasons why I don't let anyone schedule any calls with me within 24 hours is because at the end of my day, I look at my next day and I say, where do I have room in my calendar? I'm going to block 30 minutes to work on this client project. I'm going to block an hour for that client project. And so I'm not tracking time. I'm blocking time, and I'm giving myself time in my calendar to do things. And when I hit the limit, if I'm not done, I move on to the next thing. It stays on my to-do list, my master list of things I need to time block and get done. And then I'll time, if I need to get it done in a certain period of time, I will time block more time for that the next day. And so I use time blocking as a way to control my time, though I'm not tracking my time. Do you know what I'm saying? What do you think about something like that as an alternative?
I think it's a great organizational tool, but I still don't think it gives you the level of data that you need to determine, are my prices appropriate? I mean, how do you make decisions to raise your subscription prices?
I'm never going to raise my subscription prices. It only costs me $5,000 a year to operate my business. I'm super profitable. I don't need to. I'm not trying to grow. I'm trying to sustain a lifestyle. I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur. I'm not
Well,
trying to grow to a big law firm. So I'm profitable. I'm sustaining my lifestyle. That's all I need, right? So I'm profitable.
I love the fact that you block time, and that's a great organizational tool to get things done in a structured manner. But if you were saying, hey, I'd like to hire one or two staff attorneys and grow this business, grow and scale it, then I think you would really need to track time in order to develop them, create people that can replace you at some point so that you can go do higher level things. Now, as a solo practitioner, you're making a comfortable living, you're happy, then you are free from the burden of tracking time. But if you wanted to grow and scale and you were going to hire some staff, I think you'd need to track time. Now, not to the level of detail that you're going to need to provide on a bill, because that's not what you're doing, but just chunks of time spent working on XYZ client or this admin responsibility to go back and make decisions based on pricing, based on staff development, client satisfaction. I mean, it works for you, but if you have any staff or you want to grow and scale, I think you need to track time.
And that is the interesting thing. And I think that the legal profession is going to change. I've only talked about it once before on the show, but Kant, a philosopher, talked about the categorical imperative. And the last time I brought up the categorical imperative, okay, this is where I'm going to lose people. Just I promise you, slow it down to one-time speed if you're listening to it too fast right now, because we're going to get into philosophical jargon just for a couple minutes. So the categorical imperative basically says whatever you do or whatever you say, then you're imposing on all other people that they should do and say those things too. And it's not always true. I mean, Kant would say it's always true, and this is why you shouldn't lie and all these other things, right? And the last time I brought up the categorical imperative, I was saying I'm not trying to employ it, but now I am. And so I think that my decision and how I've decided to practice law is pretty good. Like, I'm never going to be a multimillionaire. That's okay. That's okay. But I'm living a comfortable life. I'm helping a lot of clients. And I have incredible work-life balance. If I got a call from the daycare right now, I could go pick up my kid because I'm in control. We could get another scheduled call with another client, or something like that, right? So, or the client could schedule another time to talk. So I'm just saying that I think that, this might be, I think we're going to see a lot of lawyers where they realize it's very cheap and easy to start their own solo practice and do all the automations with AI and stuff like what you're doing with your 1099s. I think this is a way to go. That being said, there's going to be a change in the way of practice. So speaking of 1099s, I expect if law moves in this direction, that lawyers are going to need to do a lot of outsourcing to each other or to other fractional team members, right? To stay true solo. I'm not at the scale yet where I'm going to start outsourcing like that, though I do plan to outsource in the future. So like while I have no need for 1099s for my firm at some point, like I'll hire a fractional VA or I'll hire a fractional CFO. I'll outsource those things maybe in the future. So I still see myself outsourcing things. So I'll have needs for like CPAs. So you guys aren't going anywhere. But I just think that it works so well. Why shouldn't all other lawyers do it this way too?
Well, you seem to be content with what you're doing, but let me ask you a question. What is your exit plan? And I know you're way early in your career, but what is the plan for when are you going to work and die in your chair, or do you plan to go off into the sunset someday?
So the benefit of building a brand, which is, the podcast is Law Subscribe, but the firm is Subscription Attorney LLC, right? So I'm building a brand. I'm having subscription revenue. I have to imagine when you all bought Summit, they had subscription revenue. You paid probably a nice amount to acquire that subscription revenue based company, right?
Agreed.
So we'll see what the landscape looks like in the next 30 to 50 years. And whether it's only law firms could buy my firm, which right now that's all that could happen. Maybe there's changes to the rules of who can and can't own law firms. I think the model that I'm building, the automations that I'm building, the brand that I'm building, which is not tied directly to my name on my website is in the disclaimer. on the bottom of my website because I have to disclose it under the Illinois rules of professional conduct. But I'm not even advertising I'm the lawyer who helps, right? I'm building a brand and I'm building automations and I'm building subscription revenue. Oh yeah, I'm planning to exit at some point in the future and sell the practice to whatever law firm wants to take it over and run with it, because while my existing clients are largely served by me, their firm is Subscription Attorney LLC. It's the brand. And so I do have an exit plan to sell the firm at some point in the future. And we'll have Victoria Collier on the podcast, and we're going to talk about that because she helps lawyers buy and sell law firms. So that's my exit plan. It's not to hire and sell to somebody else. It's to sell to another firm or whatever business in the future that can own law firms wants to integrate that into their business. And frankly, I mean, I would do that in the next 10 years if I got a really good offer and they still wanted me to be around, right? Like, so that's, that's the exit plan.
Okay. And I love the fact that your name, the name of your firm does not involve you. It doesn't identify you. I think that does help increase the saleability of something. And I think if you looked at a law firm versus an accounting firm, the lack of a non-compete and the fact that in most states you have to sell to an attorney limits the pool of buyers. So it compresses the value, but firms are saleable, especially when they're not identified like with an individual's name. Okay.
Johnson and Johnson LLC.
Right? Morgan and Morgan, although they built a phenomenal brand and they do think that they took some private equity money somehow. But I liken this to, I have a client that sells franchises to people who are displaced from big companies and they come out and they want to buy a franchise. Let's say they buy a Subway franchise. They buy one. They bought a job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if they could buy 10 and hire managers to run those, then they really have something. And I think if I'm a buyer of your law firm with one person working in it, no structure, no staff, I'm buying one franchise, a Subway franchise. But if you could build something that says, okay, I'm not only doing what I do, but I'm creating a team of people who subscribe to the model, they embrace it, and they're developing so that Matthew can be replaced, then I think you've got something that's even more saleable. Because let's say a big firm buys your company, they're going to have to put in place the staff. They're going to have to train them on the subscription model and all the philosophies that go with it. And they're going to have to track time to see who's progressing and who's not.
I'll tell you, if they told me they were going to track time, I would tell them the sale is it's not going to succeed at your company. So we shouldn't do the sale.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. I think we're not asking you to account for every 10th of an hour working on a client matter, but just chunks of time to determine how efficient we are at training our people and delivering that product to the client.
So two more things I want to cover with you about the whole tracking time thing, and then we'll wrap up because I mean, this last 50 minutes has flown by. Another thing that I think you could solve those problems with, and there's an attorney out there who I need to have on the podcast who calls himself the Agile Attorney. I think it's John Grant or something like that, is the Scrum and Agile methodology for how to run a team and like build a product, right? So like these tech companies, these software companies, they're not tracking people's time. I mean, I don't know, maybe some of them are, but typically what they're doing is they're having these stand-up meetings where they're like, how are you going on this project that you're working on? What are your impediments? How can we help remove your impediments? And they do that either every day, every week, every month, every quarter, the different types of these stand-up meetings. And so they don't need to track their times because they're having these frequent enough but short. The key about Scrum and Agile is they're short meetings. People want to turn them into 30-hour-long minute meetings. We've got to be 5-10-minute meetings. We're in and we're out with these kind of things if it's done the right way. And if you do it the right way and you have these quick stand-up meetings, how's the project coming along? What are your impediments? What could I do to help remove those impediments from you getting the work done? Then it's not about how long things are taking. It's how can we move faster on this thing? And that's the focus. So the time and the mental energy that you're spending on tracking time is instead pivoted to what are the impediments? Let's remove them. Let's help you get this job done faster. What do you think about that?
I love that thought process. And that's a lot how I work in my career is let's get this thing over the finish line. What do we have to do right now to do it? Let's get moving. Don't, the worst thing that can happen is somebody 3 doors down sends you an email saying, I need this, this, and this. Just come see me. Let's just talk about it. Let's get the client on the phone. Let's get a resolution and keep things moving throughout the office and then out the door to the client. Let's solve problems for the client.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think like when you're doing that though, my thought process is, and this is all speculation, right? Because I'm not doing it, is if you were tracking time and you tried this out, you might find that the work speeds up and now the returns on tracking time for collecting that data diminish. And so the other suggestion that I have is this is the technological world that we're moving into, going back to your 1099s example. AI and automations are going to advance the speed at which we can complete previously billable tasks at such a fast pace that the savings of time that you're measuring almost becomes negligible. Like if it used to take me 20 hours to do the 1099s for like staff time, and now it's taking 1 minute for the AI to process it. Like, like why track okay, you've tracked that once. Now you know it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the time it used to take to do that. The value is there, like you mentioned earlier. So maybe you track it once and you realize, okay, the time savings here is so incredible. We never need to track this again. And I think over time, that's going to apply to everything. So why track time after you have that incredible time saving? So will you at least agree with me that there's diminishing returns to tracking time in this automated AI world?
If we had a fast forward button and we could get to that, I would agree with you. And the auto body guy is that way now, right? You wreck your car, you take it in, you need a new fender, right front quarter panel. They're dented. They need to be replaced, repainted. They have a standard time and rate to tell you that. They might be able to do it faster. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They might be able to do it slower, but there's a standard rate for those items on your car. And that's what you're going to be charged. Whether they're efficient or not is up to them, but you're going to pay that standard rate.
Right.
And I think we will get there if we have that fast forward button and get to full automation. But
right. So
the AI revolution it's not going to put us out of work, whether it's attorneys or accountants. It's going to get us to do higher level things, more consulting and less compliance.
Right. I mean, the ability, I love the 1099s example, right? Like you're still the expert on that. So the input going into the analysis and the output that it gives you, you'll spend minutes on verifying that. And you as the expert know to verify it that this is correct, but it's not going to take hours and days to do that anymore. And so I think you're absolutely right. I don't think lawyers, professionals, we're not going anywhere. Just the work that we're doing is going to change. And the knowledge, the subject matter expertise is going to be the most valuable thing that we have. And the grunt work that nobody even likes doing, even if it's billable work, that's going to go away. But I agree with you. And when you say the fast forward button, I don't know when that is. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, who knows? But at this progression rate, it's in particular the exponential growth. Like there were experts, AI machine learning experts that said, it's, that Will Smith video of eating pasta or whatever, that's what AI came up with a year or two ago. They were like, it's going to be a decade plus before we have AI that's so good that it can make a video. And now Sora just came out and we have 1 minute videos from OpenAI that look amazingly realistic. And sure, some of them have flaws, but some of them don't. And so the technology is accelerating at such an exponential rate that I think 5 years is not, and it's more probable than it was before that in 5 years we might be at that fast forward moment. I don't know though; it's hard to predict.
I do agree with you that the exponential growth is if you think about the iPhone, when the iPhone came out, it was something that wealthy people got, right? Mm-hmm. And then 20% of the world had iPhones, and all of a sudden that was the tipping point. iPhone was the standard. Now there are other phones out there, but anytime a technology hits 20%, then that's the tipping point, and AI is evolving faster than we can even imagine.
Yeah. So wrapping up the interview here, I'm glad we were able to find some common ground, first of all. But wrapping up the interview here, I'll ask you a question I like to ask all my guests towards the end to make sure they stick around. And that is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
I love a good hot dog. They don't love me, but I do love a good hot dog. I would call it a sandwich, yes.
Why do you think that?
I can't tell you why. I can tell you that I love them, but they don't love me.
Come on. We got just a little something. Your gut reaction. Why is it that to you a hot dog is a sandwich?
Because it's wrapped in bread.
Okay. All right. There we go. That's all we need. We just need a little explanation. So with that, I want to let the listeners know you do have a book that at least at the time of recording, it's in early release, or you could sign up to get notified about it. So at the time of publication, it might be out there, but in any event, link to that in the show notes. The Judicial Dollars and Cent. Tell us a little bit about the book.
The book is about the use of data and the metrics that you can use to make changes in your firm results to achieve your goals. So if you look at your cash position, we can help you define what it should be. If it's not at its desired level, what levers can you pull to get there? Your financials, production, and pipeline. If you look at pipeline, you personally have capacity as a solo, and you can say, okay, I have this much capacity, I wish to fill it. If you looked at where do my clients come from, what's my close rate, you could define how much of a pipeline you need to fill that capacity. Nobody closes 100% of their opportunities, but if you closed 50% and you had $100,000 worth of capacity, you'd need a pipeline of 200,000. So it goes through those 4 metric areas and helps you define what changes you can make to achieve your goals.
And so with that, what's the best way if any of my listeners wanted to follow up with you, John, that they could do that?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn, click on the link to the book. It'll take you to my landing page. It'll have a Calendarly button on it so that you can schedule some time with me.
John Scott, thanks again so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Matthew. It was great.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.